My name is Chili, joined here by Martine from Cactus. Thank you so much. Great in-studio session today. It was really cool to have you come into KEXP and perform. And thanks for joining me here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We talked a little bit in the interview for the session about the history of Cactus, but I kind of wanted to go a little farther back and maybe talk about your musical history to start. So you were born in Argentina, but moved to Miami, Florida pretty young?
Yeah, I was born in Buenos Aires and I moved as a baby.
Mm-hmm.
I was maybe 1 year old.
And what brought you guys to Miami?
My dad had a record label in Miami,
Mm-hmm.
and he was distributing music from all over South America.
Super cool. What was the record label?
It was A&S Records.
Okay. And your grandfather, let's go back even farther, was part of a label as well in Argentina?
Yes, he had a record company, Sica Americana, which had labels like Music Hall and Shazam. They had a lot of big Argentine rock artists like Ceru Girán, León Gieco, yeah, tons of stuff. Arcoiris.
Super cool. So was that part of your plan then, to also run a record label?
That'd be nice someday.
So let's go back to Miami. So what was it like growing up in Miami? It's a pretty multicultural place to grow up, and it seems like music was definitely part of your family life.
Yeah, it was definitely different than Seattle. I think 90% of my elementary school class was Latin American immigrants, first generation or second generation, but mostly immigrant families.
Mm-hmm. Did your family speak English and Spanish, like at home, or?
Yeah, I spoke Spanish at home.
Spanish at home, and the school was probably some of both, or?
School was English mostly, yeah.
And when did you start to get into music? Did you start to dig in your father's crates, like, early?
Yeah, definitely. I would go to the warehouse where he would ship out all his records from and kind of dig through stuff. I'd be helping him package up boxes and shipments to different record stores and things like that, and kind of be like, oh, what's this? And take it home, listen to it, and discovered a lot of music that way.
Wow, it's like a dream come true.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like your own personal record store. Was he sharing stuff with you too and explaining the artists and labels, or?
Yeah, definitely. He was really into like Argentine classic rock. So a lot of that he shared with me.
Super cool. And tell me about some of your favorite musics as a kid. Did you gravitate towards certain sounds, or?
Yeah, I remember, I think a lot of the Argentine folk sounds were really, they resonated with me. Artists like Atahualpa Yupanqui, I discovered in his warehouse, and also there was a lot of like quena music, like Peruvian carnavalito type stuff. He had a lot of compilations too, like compilations from Colombia and Peru and all sorts of different countries. And
so you're getting exposed to rhythms from all over Latin America at a young age. That's super cool. What other kind of stuff did you like say Colombia or Peru? Other cumbias and?
Yeah, a lot of cumbia in there too. It was funny. It was the 90s, so there was a lot of cumbia covers with like a lady in the bikini, like as the front of the album cover, and so that'd be like hidden for me a little bit, but
because of the album cover.
Yeah, there were compilations mostly, like, yeah.
And when did you start playing music?
Pretty early on. My dad played guitar and flute, and he, taught me a little guitar. And
do you play out in bands and stuff?
He produced a few artists, I think, but he wasn't actively playing bands, more just running a record label. So.
Mm-hmm. But doing some recording too then?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so my grandfather's label had, it wasn't just a record company, but they also had their own recording studio and they pressed their own vinyl. So he had exposure to that whole production process and learned a lot and taught me a lot about production as well through that.
Super cool. So where did you start on, like piano or guitar or drums?
Piano and guitar, exactly. Yeah, I think first grade I took my first guitar lesson, learned to play La Cucaracha, and took piano lessons from a pretty young age. And pretty early on, you know, my dad he had a recording set up in his office, and he'd record my silly little songs, and yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Kind of taught me what he was doing.
It seems perfect for what you're doing now, fusing electronics with different Latin rhythms. It's like you were made to do this. You had such a repertoire of things that you knew from an early age. And when you became older, did you want to play like Latin sounds, or did you lean towards like punk rock or?
Yeah, I think especially when I moved to Seattle, I was leaning towards punk rock and more garage type sounds.
How old were you when you moved from Miami?
I was 13. Yeah. So kind of that ripe age of rebellious youth, and yeah, I was excited to come to Seattle because there was, especially for young people, there's a lot of music culture here. A lot of this stuff in Miami is oriented towards adults and kind of a party scene. So yeah, things like KEXP and Vera Project were pretty eye-opening. And house shows. I remember moving here and being pretty stoked on, you know, being an underage kid that could go to a house show. And
what was the difference like? Miami definitely has a lot of Latin sounds and culture.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle is definitely a different twist, no?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, totally different. Not much Latin music here, so.
So like teenage years, were you playing rock and roll? Did you kind of leave like traditional and like folklore sounds behind, or were you still digging that stuff too?
I was still digging it, but I think the music I was working on was more oriented towards, I don't know, a little bit of both. I was kind of, you know, trying to navigate both influences in my music.
So when did you start to focus on making like cumbia beats and like new versions of folkloric sounds and electronics?
I think it was right after, it must have been like 2010. There was a lot of really interesting stuff coming out of Buenos Aires with labels like ZZK Records, and kind of this new outlet of, you know, not just cumbia, but folkloric sounds working their way into electronic and, yeah, contemporary music. I thought that was really cool, so I started to explore that a little bit.
Do you start to like research like some different traditional styles and folkloric sounds and Andy sounds?
Yeah, definitely. So I did like, you know, I would make remixes of Atahualpa Yupanqui tracks that I really liked, and kind of at first mixing them with like glitchy IDM, and experimented with some tango also.
Were you DJing?
No.
No.
Not really. Yeah, mostly just production.
What were you doing with these tracks then?
Just hoarding
Sharing
them.
them?
Yeah.
Just hoarding them?
Yeah. Just
Practicing.
keeping them to myself, and sharing them with friends, but whatever, but not performing them live.
Mm-hmm. When did Terror Cactus start to be then? Like when you really felt like you started to have your specific take on this?
It came together, I guess, like 2 or 3 years ago. I had a lot of performing experience in other more rock-oriented bands, playing keyboards and guitar, and wanted to take this stuff that I've been collecting and working on and bring it to like a live performance experience that was exciting. So I dug through the stuff that had a lot of guitar in it and put together some new tracks and came up with the first album, Cerro Invisible, and started performing those songs and came up with the light show, and yeah, kind of took off from there.
Super cool. Did you travel back to Latin America much, like as a young adult? And
yeah, it was definitely easier when I lived in Miami. I would go, 3 months every summer. We would go back because a lot of my parents' family was still there, and it was really nice for them to be able to visit.
Once you started making music, did you feel a different connection when you went back, or a different interest in checking out some more sounds or digging a little deeper?
Definitely. Yeah, there's always been music has always been something a way that I've connected with my heritage, I guess, is through exploring those sounds. And even regionally in Argentina, there's such a diversity of different styles and things to discover that it was kind of just like an endless treasure chest of fun.
That's super cool. So it's a connection to your heritage, but also a way to express yourself in a new way. And what do you think? Maybe this is a loaded question. There's quite a few artists who are combining traditional or folkloric sounds with electronic and other live instrumentation. What's your take on your sound? I know that's a hard question to answer. I'm not asking it quite the right way.
Yeah, I think my sound definitely has a lot of the Seattle influence. It has both the Argentine folk and the music I grew up listening to in my father's warehouse and all that, but also stuff that I've been exposed to here. So a lot of like more guitar-oriented, crunchy stuff, and maybe some kind of dark moods every now and then that kind of reflect the rainy, gloomy weather sometimes and short days. So yeah, I think there's also some surf influence there. I think that there was there's been a lot of great surf bands come out of Seattle, surprisingly, and kind of that garage sound. So what I try to bring into it.
Definitely. That's a good description, yeah. Somewhere between Seattle and Argentina.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And when you go back, you're sampling different sounds, nature, and different things that you're finding in your travels?
Yeah.
What are you looking for when you just are open-minded and recording a bunch of things?
I guess just things that resonate for whatever reason. Like in this latest EP I did, there's a song called Charco, which means puddle, and it was based around a sample that I was walking in Uruguay by a puddle, and these little frog sounds. It was like the weirdest, weird little frog sound, not like your typical croak, right? And I just thought that was so cool. And there was like a whole bunch of them singing, so I just got real close with like my little field recorder, and yeah. And then later I came back and I was messing around with the sampler and kind of isolated the one part that kind of had the most peculiar sound to it, and yeah.
Cool, I love that.
It was cool.
Let's talk a little bit about Seattle. So it's not necessarily known here as having a big Latin music scene. There definitely always has been, and there's been some great bands. But in the last few years or so, it's been really cool to see a younger generation of Latinos and others making different fresh sounds. Sometimes that fuses Latin rhythms and moods and themes, and sometimes not. What's your perspective on, I'm going to say, the young Latin Seattle sound?
I think it's really exciting. I think that's definitely, it's like a new community that we see growing in Seattle. Bands like Tres Leches, bands like Guayaba, and there's so many more out there. it's really, really exciting.
Cool. What do you see for the future of music making? You're about to do some more traveling, and I'm hoping and thinking you're going to want to continue to do Terra Cactus sounds. What else is in the works for you?
Yeah, just more of that. I'd love to do some, stuff for film maybe. Would be really exciting. Collaborations, remixes, yeah, music videos.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. I was so glad to have you in studio for a session. New EP sounds great. And like I said, I wish you well. Please keep experimenting and making fresh music. Super cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Discover new music at listener-powered KEXP.org.